have to say, I did have a little trouble with this talk. I didn't think I would ever create this talk because I don't like the word failure. It feels really judgmental to me. And I realized I don't think in terms of that word when I think about my life or my work or anything that's happened. I just know some things work out and some things don't. Some things are a great success and some things totally flop. But even the things that totally flop have value. For me, if I think of those things as failures, and I don't see the value, and then I start to think it's me, something's wrong with me that I couldn't make this happen. And I know that's putting a lot of power on a word, and that's probably why I walked away from this talk so many times, because it brought up that judgment around failure. And I had to get past my own bias with the word failure. Unfortunately, I'm still working on that. So I'm going to talk about the benefits and blessings that we can receive when things don't work out. You can substitute failure, but I'm going to talk about when things don't work out. And I like how Thomas Edison puts it. I have not failed. I just found 10,000 ways that won't work. And I think that's a wonderful way of looking at that word, failure. It's only failure if we judge it that way. Otherwise, we just keep going forward knowing, well, that didn't work. Something else is coming in. I think our greatest learning opportunities come from things that don't work out. I was thinking back to when I got fired from my first job. I learned choices have consequences. And I can look back now and see that other things were more important to me than that job. I didn't have any sense of balance. So now, if something isn't working out, I have this question to ask myself. Is something else more important to me? Do I have my priorities straight? Am I out of balance? Sometimes I just have to start with what are my priorities right now? Because our priorities change. And when that happens, some things don't work out and we're going to try new things. Like Bob said, I recently agreed to take on a larger role at the Center for Spiritual Living, Florida Gulf Coast here in Largo. And in doing that, I got really busy getting things done at the center. And I noticed things were not working so well at home. My mom had things come up and started to get worried and anxious because she didn't know where I was. Now, I didn't just disappear. I told her where I was and what I was doing, but she didn't remember. And even though she is basically healthy and independent, there are things she can't do anymore. So she counts on me to be here. And I realized I had to figure out my priorities, or things were going to get more complicated at home. And things were probably not going to work out real well at the center either. I had to step back and take the time to think about this, because both the center and my mom are very important to me. So I had to ask myself, what is my top priority? Which I think I knew that, but I had to ask it to make it very clear to me. I needed to consciously know what my top priority is so I wouldn't get overwhelmed by trying to do it all. The answer was quick and clear. My mom comes first. I mean, I know this in my heart. And what I found when I clarified in my mind that priority, my mind shifted how I'm showing up at home and at the center. I thought it was really interesting that reflecting on losing my first job gave me some insight into what's happening now. And I'm reaping the benefits of being clear about what is my top priority. It's like all this information started flowing in. These great ideas are coming to me that are going to make my mom feel more secure, make my life easier when I'm working with her. And I'm clear on what is mine to do at the center. I let go of the crazy idea that it was all up to me to coordinate everything there and at home. I know that we have a really good team at the center, just like the team y'all have here. You guys know what to do and you do it well. And clearing my mind and setting my priorities, I got a better understanding that these people do as well. They know what to do. They're just as engaged as you all are. And I guess the point I want to make is anything that didn't work out or that you may label as a failure is a place to find pearls of wisdom. Thinking about that job just shifted my awareness that I was overwhelmed and hadn't figured out, what was important to me, what my priorities are. And if we don't take time, for me to figure out those priorities, but for you, it may be some other pearl of wisdom. If we don't take time to find those pearls of wisdom and use them as we move forward in our life, there's a good chance we're going to get to have those same not working out experiences again and again until we do. Because every experience provides a lesson. It helps us learn and grow who we are, what we want, how we want to show up. And don't ever think you don't know, or that there isn't more value available from a past experience. That wisdom is always within you, and it's just waiting for you to be ready to listen. We change throughout life. And so as we do that, when we look at something that happened in the past, we get a whole new perspective and a new understanding. And that whatever didn't work, or what people want to call failure, gives us new wisdom to do better in our current life. Ernest Holmes writes in the Science of Mind text, "We should not despise apparent failures, the temporary chagrins of life, for they are salutary, leading the soul to the inner Christ, the way, the truth, and the life. When the experience is complete, the lesson will be learned, and we shall enter the paradise of contentment." I have to say, I hadn't thought of it as contentment, and it does ring true with me now, but I had had a sense of peace when I've recognized the lessons in a temporary chagrin of life. I mean, when you've had these times where you've had aha moments from something that didn't work out, didn't you feel better each time you found something good in the experience that didn't feel good at the time? When I find those things, it seems to take the sting out of a memory, because I see it in a different light. I can, what's the word I want? I can appreciate it for what it gave me, not what I may have lost. So when we look for those gems of wisdom, those pearls of wisdom in the past, we're not only gaining insight for now and in the future, we're shifting any residual negative emotions or disappointments that we may have had with that experience that didn't work out. And each time we do that, that opens a window to learn something more. I've had this happen a lot of time when I look back on my marriage. It's amazing the things I didn't realize until 25 years later. I didn't realize who I was at that time until I was someone else and could see, okay, I'm so glad I've learned a lot more. And that experience was a two-way street. It lets me bring in compassion when I can look back on different experiences and grow and see who I am now compared to who I was then. But what if something that doesn't work out is an opportunity that shows up at just the right moment? I have a friend whose business wasn't doing well. I mean, his business had become a one-man show, and he was just doing what was absolutely necessary to keep it going. And it just was not thriving. It was getting to the point where he was going to have to let the building go. I know it was a tough decision for him, but he was pretty burned out from doing everything himself. So he turned the business over to someone else. Before the final paperwork had been signed, he was offered a new position in another company working with a great team. When I saw him after that first week at the new company, I was amazed by the transformation in his appearance and attitude. Letting go of that business that wasn't working and was actually bringing him down opened up a really great opportunity for him. He stepped into an environment that fed him, that let him grow, that didn't require him to take care of everything. I think we all hold on to some things longer than is good for us. I know that I've done it in the past. And it's like, why didn't I let go? Things are so much better now. Luckily, Spirit is waiting there for us to let go and just jumps in with what is going to expand our lives when we're finally ready. I believe we are here to be happy and have a good life. And that's what Spirit brings to us. If we hold on to what's not working, how are we ever going to be open to receive the good that is possible, that's waiting for us right now in this moment? Ernest Holmes writes in It's Up to You, principle is not bound by precedent. We should confidently expect a greater good than we have ever experienced. When we let go of what's not working and confidently expect a greater experience, a greater good, how could it not show up for us? Because God's always working for us when we let it happen, when we expect it. We set that law in motion. So we have to be open to receive. And when we do this, amazing opportunities show up. I think that's why I don't see things as a failure. Because I know that what's not working, when I let it go, something better is going to show up. And I learn from what I already have experienced. I would like to share two stories that illustrate my last point. One's a folk tale you may have heard, and the other is something that actually happened to the person that wrote about it. I'm going to start with the folk tale. It's the story of the cracked pot. I'm going to read this. A water bearer in India had two large pots, and one hung on each end of a pole, which she carried across her neck. One of the pots had a crack in it, while the other pot was perfect and always delivered a full portion of water at the end of the long walk from the stream to the mistress's house, the cracked pot arrived only half full. This went on every day for a full 2 years, with the bearer delivering only 1.5 pots full of water to her master's house. The perfect pot was proud of its accomplishments. It always was full when they got to the house, but the poor cracked pot was ashamed and miserable that it could only accomplish half of what it had been made to do. After 2 years of what this little cracked pot perceived to be a bitter failure, it spoke to the water bearer one day by the stream. And he said, "I am ashamed of myself, and I want to apologize to you." "Why?" asked the bearer. "What are you ashamed of?" "Well, for these past 2 years, I have only been able to deliver half my load because this crack in my side causes water to leak out all the way back to your mistress's house. Because of my flaws, you have to do all this work and you don't get full value from your efforts. I feel like such a failure." The water bearer felt sorry for the old cracked pot, and in her compassion, she said, "As we return to the mistress's house, I want you to notice the beautiful flowers along the path." And as they went up the hill, the old cracked pot saw the sun warming the beautiful wild flowers on the side of the path, and this cheered it some. But at the end of the trail, the little cracked pot still felt bad, still felt like a failure because it had leaked out half of its load. So it apologized to the bearer again for its failure. And then the bearer said to the pot, "Did you notice that there were flowers only on your side of the path, but not on the other pot's side? That's because I've always known about your flaw and I took advantage of it. I planted flower seeds on your side of the path, and every day while we walk back from the stream, you've watered them. For 2 years, I have been able to pick these beautiful flowers to decorate my mistress's table. Without you being just the way you are, she would not have this beauty to grace her house." The little pot thought it was a failure, but that was just his perspective. It really wasn't a failure. So sometimes what we think is a failure isn't a failure. The second story I found, it's from Dale Burke's book, The Second Coming. And she writes that years ago, she attended a conference. When it was over, her friend Bruce offered her a ride to the airport, and as they were about to leave, another man asked if he could join them. Well, as they drove away from the hotel, she and Bruce asked the man where he worked, and he mentioned a Christian organization. And Bruce said, "I have fond memories of that group because I attended a retreat of theirs one time, and that's where I became a Christian. It was in 1972 in New Hampshire." So Bruce went on to explain that eventually his whole family became Christians and went into Christian work. His sister was a Wycliffe missionary, and Bruce himself became publisher of a major Christian publishing house, which brought many significant Christian books to the public. Now, Bruce finished the story with a flourish, saying that the retreat had had worldwide impact when you think about it. The man was silent, and Dale and Bruce thought that maybe they were boring him. Then the stranger quietly said, "I led that retreat. It was my first time as a conference leader, and I felt like a total failure. Until this moment, I have always believed it was one of the biggest failures of my life." After that, in the book, Dale Burke wrote, "What had seemed like the simple act of offering a ride to a stranger had turned into a powerful reminder that God uses our efforts, whether we realize it or not. I may spend the rest of my life doing things that don't seem at all successful, yet only God knows the purpose. I'm called simply to be faithful. That story chokes me up to have that interaction and to find out that something you thought was a failure, that you thought didn't work at all, made such a big difference in someone's life. Now, that cracked pot and that conference leader thought they were failures. Without knowing it, the cracked pot caused all these beautiful flowers to grow. And the conference leader, thinking for all those years that that first conference was a total failure, inspired a whole family and through them touched the world. We may never know the impact that we make in the world, especially from the things we think are failures, from the things that we think didn't work out. I love what Dale Burke wrote at the end of that story. God uses our efforts, whether we realize it or not. What we may think of as flaws, not good enough, didn't work out, or failure may end up being something magnificent to someone else. I really invite you to remember that. What looks like a failure to you may have been the one thing that touched someone at a really deep level. And when we fail forward, when we find the wisdom in the experiences that don't work, we fail forward. When we recognize the opportunities that open up, when we let go of what isn't working, we fail forward. And whether we're a great success or didn't work out or something didn't work out, we fail forward when we trust that God uses our efforts no matter what. God uses our efforts even when we think we've failed. You know, I think of the word failure a little like the word sin. A sin is just a mistake, and failure is just something that didn't work out the way we planned. The good thing is we always learn and grow from both. And we remember the lessons, we remember to let go, and when we remember that God is always working for us, failure is not an option. Thank you.